By the time people started saying the word Glawackus out loud, the town was already afraid, not panic, not screaming hysteria, just that quiet kind of fear that settles over a place when the nights suddenly stop feeling normal. I remember exactly when it began, autumn of 1939, Glastonbury, Connecticut. Back then I was 23 years old, living with my uncle on a small farm near the northern woods. Those forests felt endless in those days, miles of pine trees, wet earth, fog hanging low across empty roads after sunset. At night, the darkness became so thick it felt almost solid. And sometimes that September, something changed out there. The first dog disappeared from old Mr. Harlow's property. Nobody thought much of it at first. Dogs wander, that's everybody said. But then another vanished 3 nights later, then another. Soon, farmers across town were waking up to snapped chains, torn fences, and empty yards. No blood, no tracks, no bodies, just silence. I still remember the morning my uncle found our own hound missing behind the barn. Duke was a massive hunting dog, mean enough to scare coyotes away from the property. But the metal stake holding his chain had been bent sideways in the ground like soft wire. My uncle stared at it for a long time without speaking. Then he quietly said something I'd never heard from him before. Something ain't right in them woods. That same night, I heard the scream for the first time. I woke thinking a woman was dying somewhere beyond the fields. The sound echoed through the darkness just after midnight, high-pitched, shrill, almost human, but wrong in a way I still cannot explain. The horses instantly panicked in the barn. I remember rushing to the bedroom window while cold wind rattled the glass. Then the scream came again, closer this time, somewhere near the tree line. My uncle was already standing on the porch holding a lantern and shotgun. I could see fear in his face despite the darkness. That frightened me more than the scream itself, because my uncle had fought men in France during the Great War, and I had never seen him afraid of anything. The woods stood completely black beyond the pasture, no movement, no sound. Then, for just a second, I saw 2 orange lights hovering between the trees, eyes watching the house. And before I could even speak, they vanished. The next morning, the entire town was talking about the screams. Men gathered outside the general store pretending they weren't frightened while quietly comparing stories. Some claimed they heard something moving across their rooftops during the night. Others swore they'd seen shadows crossing the roads after midnight. But nobody agreed on what they had actually seen. That was the strangest part from the very beginning. Every description sounded different. Mrs. Bellamy claimed she saw a giant black panther near the chicken coop. A truck driver passing through town insisted the creature stood upright beside the woods before dropping on all fours and disappearing. One hunter swore it looked like a wolf with a cat's face. Another man described something almost bear-like. It was as if the darkness itself changed shapes depending on who looked at it. By evening, the newspapers had already arrived. Phantom beast terrorizes Connecticut town. People laughed while reading the headlines, but the laughter never lasted long, not after sunset. That evening, my uncle sent me out to repair part of the northern fence before autumn another storm rolled in. I remembered the cold wind moving through the cornfields while the sky slowly darkened over the woods. The horses were restless again. They kept staring toward the tree line. Animals notice things before people do. I was hammering one of the fence posts when everything suddenly became quiet. Not normal quiet, dead quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed to stop. Then one of the horses let out a nervous whine. I turned slowly toward the woods. At first, I saw nothing except rows of black trees standing motionless in the fading light. Then I noticed them, two orange lights hovering low between the trunks, eyes far apart, watching me. I froze completely. The thing didn't move, didn't blink. It simply stood there, staring from the darkness beyond the fence. I remember trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light, maybe reflections, maybe another animal, but deep down I already knew that wasn't true, because no normal animal had eyes like that, and no normal animal had eyes could make the air itself feel so wrong. The horse nearest the fence suddenly screamed and kicked violently against the gate. The moment I looked away, the eyes vanished, not gradually, instantly, as if whatever had been standing there had never existed at all. I ran back toward the house without even grabbing my tools, and sometime after midnight, while the storm rolled across the hills, I heard heavy footsteps circling the barn outside my bedroom window. The first people who refused to believe it were the same ones who started reloading rifles. That's how fear works in a place like this. It never looks like fear at first, it looks like preparation. Men began showing up at like it was just another errand. They talked loudly, laughed too hard, tried to turn it into something ordinary, but their eyes kept drifting toward the woods whenever they thought no one was watching them. Someone said it was a big cat. Someone else said coyotes had gone mad. Then an old lumberman spoke up about something he'd heard years ago in the northern camps, a name passed around half as joke, half as warning: Glawackus. Nobody in the room liked the word. It didn't sound like anything real. It sounded like something made up to keep children from wandering too far from firelight. But once it was spoken, it stuck. And once it stuck, people stopped pretending they weren't afraid. A hunting group formed without any official reason. Farmers, trappers, a few men who simply couldn't sit still while something unknown moved near their land. I went with them without thinking too much about it. At that point, I still felt like something that could be solved, a problem with tracks, a problem with bullets. The woods swallowed us quickly. The moment we crossed beyond the lost fields, everything changed. Sound dropped away first, like someone had placed a hand over the entire forest. Even our boots seemed too loud against the damp ground. The deeper we went, the more the forest felt aware, not alive in the way animals are alive, something else, something that listens without moving. The dogs we brought with us stopped pulling forward. Their confidence disappeared in an instant. They began circling close to their handlers, whining low in their throats, refusing to go deeper no matter how hard they were pulled. Then they found the tracks, pressed into soft earth near a narrow creek bed. They were too large to belong to anything that should have been moving through those woods. But that wasn't the worst part. The shape didn't stay consistent. Some impressions looked like paws. Some looked almost like hands. Some seemed to drag instead of step, as if whatever made them wasn't moving in a normal way at all. One of the men crouched beside them for a long time without speaking. Finally, he stood up and said, "That thing's been walking upright." Nobody answered him because nobody wanted to imagine what that meant. We followed the trail deeper until the trees opened slightly into a clearing that felt wrong the moment we stepped into it. Dead deer lay scattered across the ground, not torn apart, not eaten, just placed there, too still, too arranged. The dogs went silent at the same moment, as if every sound had been pulled out of them all at once. Then something answered from the trees beyond the clearing. A sound came back, not an echo, a reply, and it didn't belong to anything that should have been standing in a forest. The men who had been joking earlier didn't speak again after that. Their hands tightened on their rifles, but nobody fired. Not yet. Because whatever was out there was closer than anyone wanted to admit. And it was listening just as carefully as we were. Nobody spoke after that sound came back from the woods. It wasn't just silence anymore. It felt like something had pressed the world down until even breathing sounded risky. We pushed forward anyway. That's the part people never understand about groups like that. Once you go deep enough, turning back feels worse than whatever might be waiting ahead. The forest grew tighter around us, trees standing too close together, branches tangled overhead until even the sky felt distant. The light faded strangely fast, like the woods were swallowing it. Then the smell hit us. Wet fur, rot, something metallic underneath it all that made the back of my throat tighten. We didn't have to say it out loud. Everyone felt it at the same time. Something had been here recently. And then the trees opened into a clearing. At first it looked empty, too empty. Then the dead deer came into view. 5 of them, lying in different positions across the ground like they had been dropped there rather than killed. No blood scattered like a natural attack. No feeding marks. No signs of struggle. Just silence frozen into shape. One of the younger men stepped forward and whispered, "That's not normal." Nobody argued, because there was nothing natural about it. And then I saw movement beyond the far edge of the clearing. Not fast, not sudden, just shifting. Something crouched low behind a fallen tree, half hidden in shadow. It didn't feel like spotting an animal. It felt like realizing something had already been watching us for a long time before we ever arrived. The shape slowly lifted its head. Even from that distance, I could see the reflection of light catching in its eyes. Not natural light, something colder, something almost ember-like. One of the hunters raised his rifle, but his hands were shaking too much to steady it. The creature rose slowly, not like an animal getting up, more like something unfolding itself upward. Wrong proportions, too tall, too heavy in the shoulders, too aware. And then it made a sound, not a roar, not a growl. A scream that didn't feel like it came from lungs. It hit the clearing like a physical force. Every man fired at once. Gunshots ripped through the forest, breaking the stillness completely. Branches snapped overhead. Birds erupted somewhere far away. But the thing didn't fall. It moved, not running in any normal sense. It slipped between the trees in bursts, appearing in one place and vanishing from another as if the forest itself was refusing to hold it still. Then everything went quiet again, like the gunfire had never happened. When the echoes faded, there was nothing left in the clearing except broken branches and disturbed earth. No blood, no body, no confirmation of anything at all. Just the same suffocating silence we had walked into. And for the first time that day, I understood something none of us wanted to admit. We hadn't entered the woods to find it. We had entered them because it had already decided to show itself. We told ourselves it won't come closer. That was the lie we all held on to. Because once something like that shows itself in the woods, you start believing distance is protection. That if it stays in the trees, it stays contained. But the woods don't work like that. Neither does whatever was moving inside them. It happened without warning. The Wheeler farm had sat farther out than most places, 2 miles past the last stretch of road where the forest begins to close in again. A place like that always feels isolated, even in daylight. At night, it disappears completely. Around midnight, the silence broke, not gradually, instantly. Chickens erupted first, panicking, screaming inside their coop like something had grabbed hold of the entire structure. Then came the sound that made everything worse. A human scream, a man's voice, cut off halfway through. After that, there were gunshots, not steady, not controlled, just bursts of panic echoing across the fields. Then nothing. The next morning, people gathered at the Wheeler property slowly, as if walking too fast might make the situation real. The front door was open, swaying slightly in the wind. Inside, the house looked wrong immediately. Furniture overturned, chairs scattered like something had moved through without caring what broke in its path. Not a break-in, not a struggle in a human sense. Something larger had passed through, something that didn't need to squeeze through spaces meant for people. Mr. Wheeler was found alive but barely conscious near the staircase. Deep scratches ran across his shoulder and chest, too wide to match any animal known in the region. He kept repeating the same thing while they carried him out. Inside. It was inside. Outside the barn, the chicken coop had been destroyed in a way that didn't make sense at first glance. Wooden panels bent outward, wire fencing twisted like it had been pulled apart by hands that didn't understand limits. Not torn, not cut, bent, like pressure had been applied from the inside out. And Mrs. Wheeler, she was sitting near the porch when we arrived, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. When someone asked her what happened, she didn't answer right away, just kept shaking her head slightly. Then she spoke. It stood at the window. That was the only thing she said at first. We thought she meant she saw it outside, but that wasn't what she meant. She said it pressed itself against the glass from the outside and just watched them move inside the house. Not rushing, not attacking immediately, watching, like it understood what it was looking at. Then she said something that made the entire group go quiet. It tried the door, not breaking it, not clawing, trying the handle, like it had done it before, like it knew exactly how doors worked. After that, nobody doubled, nobody doubted anymore that whatever this was, it wasn't just moving through the woods, it was learning the edges of the world we lived in, and it was getting closer to crossing them. After the Wheeler farm, people stopped talking about a creature in the woods like it was a rumor. They started talking like it was a presence, something that didn't just appear and disappear anymore, but stayed in the background of everything, watching, waiting. That's when Elias Boone came back into town. He wasn't from Glastonbury originally, but everyone knew him by reputation. A trapper, a man who could read forests the way most people read signs on roads. Quiet, focused, The kind of man who didn't scare easily because he had spent too much time alone in places where fear doesn't help you survive. At first, he treated the stories the same way everyone else had in the beginning, with a small smile, like it was just another local exaggeration. But that changed quickly because Elias went into the woods alone one morning and didn't come back until dusk. When he finally did return, something in him had shifted. He didn't speak to anyone right away, just stood outside the general store for a long time, as if deciding whether he should even be there. Then he walked in. The room went quiet without anyone asking it to. Elias didn't sit down, he didn't take off his coat, he just said, "I followed it." That was enough to make everyone stop moving. Because up until that moment, nobody had ever spoken like they had actually gotten so close to it. He said the tracks were real, too real, but inconsistent in a way that made no sense. Sometimes they followed normal ground patterns. Sometimes they appeared where nothing should have been able to walk. Stone, frozen creek beds, places that should have held no impressions at all. And sometimes the tracks simply stopped, not faded, not lost, just ended, as if whatever had been making them had decided to stop existing in that moment. Elias said the forest behaved differently the deeper he went, like it was aware of him, not in the way animals are aware of humans, something more deliberate. He said there were moments when he could hear movement pacing him through the trees, always staying just out of sight, not attacking, not fleeing, matching him, following him. He told us he stopped once near a ridge when he thought he saw it standing between two pines in the fog. He described it carefully, like he didn't want his own words to make it more real than it already was. Tall, wrong proportions, eyes reflecting faint light like burning embers. But whatever he said after that made everyone uneasy. He said it wasn't just looking at him, it was waiting for him to notice it, like the entire chase had been arranged around that moment. Then Elias lowered his voice and said something none of us forgot. "It learns," he said. "Whatever it is, it learns how you move." Nobody laughed after that, because nobody could think of anything worse than a thing like that becoming familiar with human behavior. That night, Elias left town without telling anyone where he was going, and nobody ever saw him again. After Elias disappeared, something changed in the way the town reacted to silence. People stopped trusting quiet because quiet had started feeling like a warning. That was the first night I understood it personally. I was alone on the farm. My uncle had gone into town for supplies and didn't return before dark. It wasn't unusual, but that evening I remember feeling uneasy in a way I couldn't explain. The sky had turned heavy, like the clouds were sitting too low over the land. No wind, no movement in the fields. Even the usual night insects seemed absent. The horses were already restless before sunset. By midnight, they were panicking, not just shifting nervously, actively trying to break out. One of them slammed itself against the stall door so hard I thought the wood might splinter. That's when I grabbed the lantern. I told myself I was just checking the barn, but deep down I already knew something was wrong. The moment I stepped outside, the air felt different, thicker, like the world was holding its breath. I moved toward the barn slowly, lantern swinging, casting weak light across frozen ground. Then I heard it. Behind the structure, footsteps, not quick, not scattered, deliberate, crunch, 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 and snow that had no reason to be disturbed. I stopped walking immediately. The sound continued for a few seconds more, then stopped too, as if whatever there was there had realized I was listening. I lifted the lantern higher. The light barely reached the edge of the barn. At first there was nothing, just darkness pressed against wood and shadow. Then something shifted, a shape separating itself from the black. It stepped forward slowly, too large to belong in that space, too heavy for the way it moved. Black fur soaked with melting snow clinging to its body. And then I saw the eyes, orange, dim but burning, not reflecting light, creating it almost. Then something shifted, a shape separating itself from the black. It stepped forward slowly, too large to belong in that space, too heavy for the way it moved. Black fur soaked with melting snow clinging to its body. And then I saw the eyes, orange, dim but burning, not reflected light, creating it almost. It stood there just beyond the reach of the lantern, completely still, watching me, not rushing, not attacking, just observing. That was the moment I understood something I still can't fully explain. It wasn't behaving like an animal. Animals react, they hesitate, they either flee or they strike. This thing did neither. It studied. Its head tilted slightly as if it was trying to understand what I was. Not prey, not threat, something else, something unfamiliar. Then it made a sound, low, close to the ground, almost like laughter but wrong in shape and texture, as if it didn't fully understand how to produce it. That broke me. I raised the rifle immediately. My hands weren't steady, but I fired anyway. The shot echoed across the fields like a crack in glass. For a split second, I saw its body recoil, not from pain, but from movement alone. And then it was gone, not running, not retreating through the trees, just absent, like the space it occupied had been erased. The lantern light fell onto nothing. No tracks appeared right away, no sound returned, just silence again, but not the same silence as before. This one felt aware. I stood there for a long time, unable to move, waiting for something to happen. And when my uncle finally returned at dawn, he didn't say anything at first. He just walked around the farmhouse slowly, staring at the ground. Then he pointed. Tracks, circling the entire property, not coming in, not leaving, just moving around it, as if whatever had been out there had spent the entire night deciding what kind of thing we were. After that night, the town stopped pretending this was just a story. It wasn't fear anymore in the usual sense. It was recognition, like everyone had finally accepted there was something in the woods that didn't belong to any normal explanation. That's when the state got involved. State police started arriving in groups, speaking in low voices, carrying rifles they tried not to make obvious. But nothing about armed officers moving through Glastonbury could be hidden anymore. The message was already clear. Something real was out there. And it wasn't leaving. Rumors spread faster after that. People said it was living underground. Others said it was nesting near Black Ledge Falls, where the forest grows thick and the water runs cold enough to numb your hands in seconds. Something real was out there, and it wasn't leaving. Rumors spread faster after that. People said it was living underground. A search party went in one morning. Dozens of men, equipped, prepared, confident in that false way men get when authority shows up. They didn't come back until late evening, and when they did, nobody spoke about what happened right away. Not at first. That silence told us more than any report ever could. Later, fragments started leaking out anyway. They said they found caves near the falls, not natural looking caves, not the kind shaped slowly by water and time. Something deeper than that. Inside, there were bones, but not scattered like animal remains. Arranged, stacked in patterns that made no sense, too deliberate, too organized, like something had been placing them there with intent. One of the officers refused to go back into the woods afterward. He didn't give a reason, just resigned the next day and left town. Another officer, the one who stayed longer than the rest, spoke only once about what he saw inside. He said the walls of the cave were marked, not scratched randomly, not natural damage, marks that looked intentional, lines, shapes, patterns carved deep into stone. But he stopped talking before explaining what they meant. After that, nobody pushed him further, because even the men who didn't believe in anything supernatural were starting to understand something important. Whatever was in those woods wasn't just moving through nature, it was leaving signs behind. And those signs weren't accidental. Back in town, things started changing in ways that didn't make headlines. Dogs stopped barking at night, not because they were calm, but because they weren't responding anymore. Doors stayed locked even during the day. People avoided roads they had used their entire lives, and the worst part wasn't the sightings, it was the absence. Because sometimes the forest would go completely quiet for hours at a time. No birds, no wind, no movement at all. Like the entire landscape was waiting for something. And every time that silence fell over the town, everyone knew somewhere out there in the dark woods, it was doing the same thing again. There was an old woman living near the edge of the town named Miriam Hale. Most people avoided her house, not because she was dangerous, because she talked like she knew things others didn't want to believe, things that didn't fit into normal explanations. But when the Glawackus stories became impossible to ignore, even skeptics started listening to her. I went to see her one evening when the wind had settled and the town felt unusually still. Her house was small, leaning slightly with age, the kind of place that always smelled like smoke and old wood, no matter how much air moved through it. She let me in without asking many questions, just looked at me for a moment as if she already knew why I had come. When I mentioned the woods and the thing people were calling the Glawackus, her expression changed immediately, not confusion, recognition. That alone made my stomach tighten. She didn't sit down right away. She stayed near the fireplace, watching the flames like she was remembering something she didn't enjoy remembering. Then she said something I wasn't prepared for. She said the thing we were talking about wasn't new, that it had always been there, just forgotten between generations. She told me that old lumber camps used to speak about similar things, not with certainty, not like reports, more like warnings passed between men who had spent too long alone in the forests. They called them different names depending on the camp, but the idea was always the same, something in the woods that watched before it acted, something that didn't behave like anything normal. When I asked her what it was, she didn't answer immediately. She just stared into the fire for a long time. Then she said quietly, "They're not animals." I remember asking her what they were instead. She shook her head slightly. Hungry things, she said. The way she said it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't superstition. It sounded like someone describing something they had seen once and never wanted to see again. I tried to laugh it off, to bring it back into something reasonable, but she didn't react to that at all. She just continued speaking, like my reaction didn't matter. Then she said something that stayed with me longer than anything else anyone had told me. The woods remember fear, she said, and sometimes fear learns how to walk. I asked her if it could be killed. That made her pause for the first time. She finally turned to look at me directly, not at my face exactly, more like through it. And she said, maybe, but you'd have to find what it really is first. I didn't understand what she meant then, but I understand it now, because every person who saw it described something different, and nothing about it ever stayed the same long enough to be certain. When I left her house that night, the wind outside had picked up again, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like the woods were listening even though I was nowhere near them. After the old woman's words, nobody in the town felt comfortable pretending anymore. The idea that this was just an animal had already started falling apart long before anyone admitted it out loud. But now there was something worse than fear of the creature itself. There was expectation, like everyone knew something was coming to a head. That's when the biggest hunting party formed, not just local men this time. State officers, farmers from surrounding counties, trappers who had spent their entire lives reading forests. Nearly 40 men gathered at the edge of the northern woods on a cold morning that felt too still, even for winter. No wind, no birds. Even the dogs were uneasy. Before we entered, farmers from surrounding counties. I went with them again, though I can't say exactly why anymore. Maybe because once you've seen something like that, staying away feels impossible. The forest swallowed us quickly. Snow muffled everything. Every step felt like it was happening in another world, far away from anything human. We moved deeper in the formation at first, confident, organized. That confidence didn't last. The dogs broke first. They pulled hard against their handlers, winning, refusing to go forward. Some began circling, confused, like they had lost their sense of direction entirely. Then one of them started barking towards the ridge ahead, and the others followed instantly. That's when we heard it. Not one sound, several, from different directions at once. A strange echo that didn't behave like normal sound should. It didn't feel like it came from one place. It felt like the forest itself was producing it. Men started shouting, trying to orient themselves. Then something moved above us, fast, too fast. I looked up just in time to see a dark shape crossing between the trees overhead, far too large to move that quickly and yet doing exactly that. Gunfire erupted immediately. The sound of rifles cracked through the forest, scattering birds that weren't there a second earlier. Branches snapped somewhere out of sight. Snow shook loose from the canopy, and then I saw it. For one clear moment, not hidden, not half-glimpsed, fully present against the pale winter background. Massive, black, eyes burning orange like embers inside smoke. Its body twisted mid-motion in a way that didn't align with anything natural. Then it screamed, down at us, not from distance, from above, from everywhere at once. That sound hit harder than the gunfire. It felt physical, like pressure in the chest, like something pushing against through itself. Men scattered, some ran forward, some ran back, some just froze where they stood. I remember firing my rifle without even aiming properly, not because I thought it would matter, but because not firing felt worse. And then it was gone again. Not falling, not retreating, just missing from reality. The forest snapped back into silence like nothing had happened. A few men ran after it into the ravine below the ridge. We never saw them clearly again in that chaos. Only heard distant shouting that slowly faded into the trees. Then nothing. When the noise finally stopped, what remained was the same emptiness we had started with: broken branches, disturbed snow, tracks that didn't stay consistent long enough to follow. And that feeling again, not victory, not relief, just the sense that we had never been in control of any of it. Because whatever was in those woods had already decided when it was finished with us. After the final hunt, everything should have felt like it was over. That's what everyone wanted to believe, that something had ended, that whatever had been in those woods had finally been driven out, killed, or forced back into wherever it came from. But the truth is, what happened next didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a withdrawal, like something had simply stopped interacting with us. The first thing people noticed was the silence, not normal silence, not the kind that follows snowfall or late night emptiness. This was different. The forest itself stopped behaving the way it used to. No distant calls, no movement in the underbrush, no wind passing through the trees in its usual rhythm. Even the animals that normally returned after disturbance didn't come back the same way. It was as if the entire landscape had been reset. At first, people were relieved. Men started saying maybe it was gone, maybe it had moved on, maybe the hunting party had done enough. But none of them sounded convinced, because deep down, nobody believed it that easily. Not after everything that had been seen. Then the strangest part began. People stopped talking about it, not gradually, suddenly, as if a shared agreement had formed without words. The name Glawackus disappeared from conversations almost overnight. Even those who had seen it most clearly avoided mentioning it directly. It wasn't fear of sounding foolish anymore. It was discomfort. Like speaking about it made it feel closer again. But the forest didn't return to normal. It stayed wrong. Not active, not violent, just changed. Hunters who went back in later reported something they couldn't explain properly. The woods felt empty in a way that wasn't natural, too open in some places, too closed in others, like the structure of it had shifted slightly when no one was looking. And sometimes, when the wind moved through the trees, it didn't sound like wind anymore. It sounded like something trying to remember how wind is supposed to sound. Years passed like that. The town slowly convinced itself that whatever had happened was over. But there are things that don't end cleanly. They just stop showing themselves. And every now and then, someone would mention hearing something at the edge of the forest, a sound that didn't belong, or seeing movement where nothing should have been moving. But by then, nobody wanted to investigate anymore, because the last time people went looking for answers, they didn't come back with certainty. They came back with silence. And silence in Glastonbury was never empty again. People today like to explain it in different ways. A beard that was never seen clearly, a mountain lion that wandered too far east, mass panic, misidentification, old stories getting stretched until they broke. That's what they call it now when they talk about Glastonbury in 1939. But I was there and I know what I saw. Or maybe it's more accurate to say, I know what I didn't understand, because nothing about it ever stayed consistent long enough to become something simple. Every person who saw it described something different. Every encounter felt like it belonged to a slightly different world. And that's the part that still bothers me most. Not the size, not the strength, not even the screams that echoed through the woods like something being torn out of the air itself. It's the way it never settled into one shape, as if it didn't have to, as if it wasn't bound to be one thing at all. Sometimes I think back to what the old woman said, that the woods remember fear, that fear can learn how to walk. At the time, it sounded like superstition, something said by someone who had spent too many years alone with old stories. But now, I don't dismiss it so easily, because I've seen what happens when fear spreads through a place like that, how it changes people, how it changes silence, and maybe, just maybe, how it changes the woods themselves. There are nights, even now, when I still hear it, not clearly, not fully, just something at the edge of memory that feels like movement between trees that aren't there anymore. And I wonder if it ever truly left, or if it simply stopped being seen. Because the last truth I learned in Glastonbury is this: things like that don't end the way stories end. They don't get defeated. They don't get solved. They remain, waiting in places where light doesn't reach properly. And every so often, when the forest goes completely still, you can almost convince yourself it was never gone at all. Just watching, just waiting, just learning.